The next thing I want to pop over to is the Postini admin interface. This is where you guys all know how to do things. You've figured out how to navigate, and I just want to quickly go through that navigation flow to point out the things that I'm going to be showing you in the Google Apps demo. We're going to show you how the transition wizard is going to deal with moving over your organizational hierarchy. And I should say copy, because we're not dismantling Postini at the same time that we're setting Google Apps up. The two systems will be running in an overlapping mode until you go into the final third stage that Jack mentioned, which is putting Postini in pass-through, and then 1 week later changing your MX records. And I want to remind everybody about MX record changes. It's not something you do every day, but when you do change an MX record, the DNS servers all have the old Postini listing, and they will continue to have that until they do a refresh to pick up the new Google listing. There's never a point in time when a DNS server doesn't know where to route your email. That's why the two systems will run in an overlapping mode for a period of time until everything has been propagated in terms of where your mail is to be delivered. So, organizational hierarchy. The reason you had an organizational hierarchy in Postini was so that you could organize your users into different suborgs for the purpose of setting policies. You could organize your domain names, and you could set various policies. So in an organization, you would have specific inbound filter settings configured, outbound service settings configured, certain things for your end users to allow them to have some role in managing spam. And I'm going to describe all of that as we go through the demonstration. On the users menu, there are a number of ways that our customers were managing users in the system. You would either use the add, delete, move user option to do it manually. You would use our batch command or our easy command to script it in, or you would use the Postini directory sync service. Now, in the Google world, you'll still be able to add users manually through the control panel. You'll be able to use Google's directory services API to replace the batch commands, or Google Apps directory sync, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. As you're setting up users, you know that you can pull in their primary email address and any number of aliases that they might own. And that will still happen. The transition wizard will copy all of these values over for all of your users, including aliases, up to 30 aliases per account. I'm also going to show you the equivalent of the domains menu. So in Postini, domains were added throughout your organizational hierarchy. So you might find them in any one of your suborgs throughout your hierarchy. I'll show you in Google how we've simplified that and put them all in one location. In Postini, you could have a primary domain as well as any additional domains and aliases. That's still supported on the Google side, so we'll take a look at the domains menu. In Postini, the authorizations menu is where you would set up users to have delegated admin rights. Again, these are scattered throughout your organizational hierarchy. Once you see the list of users that got some form of authorization, you would have to click on their profile to see what permissions they got. When you were adding somebody, you would have to pick and choose from all of these options to assign those. So I'm going to show you the admin roles on the Google side to show you how we've improved that. Again, making everything in a singular location for easier administration. On the inbound servers menu, many of you may have started using the RPF menu with one or more of your email configs. The RPF menu would allow you to set up specific TLS policies or sender policy framework, IP lock, which I'll explain to you why that's not going to be moving over to Google, and DKIM checks. Or you might have set up generic SPF policies. You may have set up TLS policies. On Connection Manager, this is where Postini's threat protection for persistent SMTP attacks could be monitored and controlled. Delivery Manager is where you would have designated where Postini is delivering your valid email. Spool Manager kicks on if your on-prem email service is not available. I'll show you the equivalent of all of those in a moment. On the Outbound Servers menu, if you're using Postini for outbound services, you would have defined one or more IP ranges that you're routing email to Postini, and the reinjection host, which is basically a means of doing a private relay back to Postini in the event the email could not be delivered to the external recipient. Google supports outbound email flow from your on-prem system, and I'll show you how simple that is to set up. The report menu contains statistical reports on email flow inbound and outbound, and the log search menu allows you to troubleshoot email delivery with a waiting period of 3 hours or more before message traffic would show up. So these are all the things I'm going to navigate through on the Google side to familiarize you with where these things are. One of the things I want to talk about before we go into the admin console is the Postini transition guide that we have online. So find this as well and bookmark it, because this replaces the Postini administrative guide. This is where you'll find instructions on how to do all the same things that you use Postini for in the Google Apps platform. As Jack mentioned, we're just transitioning you to the Google Apps platform using the thin part of the service that does the same things that Postini does. We're not doing anything else in terms of turning on other services or expecting you to adopt any of the other features, though we are making that easily accessible to you at the time that you wish to do that. So on this particular page, the post-transition mail flow is depicted. You'll see that once you change your MX records, there is still a number of filter settings that the service will go through before it makes a determination to send email to what we're calling the non-Gmail inbox. So this is for our on-prem customers. For customers that have already adopted Google Apps messaging as your messaging platform, you will not have that flow. Your users will manage their spam right within their branded Gmail inbox using the spam label. For on-prem customers, your end users will still get the quarantine summary. We are redesigning the message center, as Jack mentioned, that's slated for delivery in the second calendar quarter of this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about the user experience here momentarily. But you'll see that blatant spam blocking, virus checking, blocking executables is handled by Google post-transition, not Postini. You'll still be able to set your custom policies to either reject or modify messages, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. And you'll have routing options for inbound email to go to more than one server in a load balanced or failover mode. For those of our customers that have gateways in different geographical regions, you'll still be able to manage your email flow that way, and outbound routing policies as well. So this is another good resource site for you to find and bookmark. Again, for those of you that are in the audience that have already transitioned, if you want to log into your own admin account and follow along with me, it might make this a little bit more meaningful. So I have organized the icons on the Google Apps admin console in a way that's meaningful to a Postini customer that's transitioning that has on-prem systems. You'll see that there's a More Controls option down at the bottom that allows you to pull other icons up onto the screen, or if there are icons already up here that you don't want to see, you can hide those. You can move these into any order that makes sense to how you manage your systems and what you want to be first and foremost on the screen. And timed me out because I was talking too much. The first thing I want to show you is the Users menu. So this is where the transition wizard will be copying over all of the accounts that it found in Postini that are not already in your Google Apps interface. So that comment was targeted towards any of our customers that have already adopted Google Apps as their messaging platform or have a hybrid environment. what you'll see is for those customers, you'll see that whatever organizational hierarchy you already created in Google Apps is still there, and anything that was found in Postini that isn't in Google Apps will have been created in a separate branch of your organizational hierarchy. Organizational hierarchy, it's a little bit more modern. It allows you to expand and collapse the org structure to make it easier for you to navigate through if you happen to have a more complex structure. As you click through the orgs, you'll see your users will be presented. By initially, the first name and last name for transitioning customers won't be there. It'll be their primary email address. But once you have set up our directory sync application, which is what we recommend, the directory sync application links to your LDAP, and you can map it to the family name and surname in your LDAP to make this more usable. So for those of you that still need to understand how user administration will work, you'll still be able to add users manually in the control panel. You'll be able to use the Google Apps Directory Sync tool, so you can download it to a Windows or Linux box. If you're already using the Postini Directory Sync tool, you'll notice that this looks very familiar. It was built based on the same concepts, so you'll be able to quickly understand what the configuration manager or configuration wizard is asking for and set up the same LDAP queries and so forth to make this handle user administration instead. We also have a very rich admin STK. So in there is a directory API that will replace the concept of our batch commands or the easy command. So if you're scripting in your user provisioning rules, you'll use this instead. And there'll be more information about that in coming webinars. When you click on a user profile, you'll see that the primary email address and all of the aliases are posted in here. So everything that it found in Postini got copied over. Okay. Next up is the ability for you guys to reorganize your users. So Beth came over in the Jumbo East Coast office's organization because that's where she was in Postini. Maybe you don't want her to be in that organization anymore. You want to move her to a different one. So this little icon right here, the little bobblehead with the arrow pointing away, is the move user option. Makes it really simple for you to navigate to whichever organization you want to move that user to, and with a click OK, that user profile got moved. The same policies that you're used to in Postini, where once a user moves to a different org, the rules in that org are now controlling their email, still applies here. Back on the main screen, I now want to show you the domains menu. So as I mentioned, in Postini, your domains would have been scattered throughout your organizational hierarchy. We put them all in one spot in the Google Apps control panel. When you're starting your transition, you're going to be asked to select which domain name you're going to use. If you have more than one, please pick the one that truly is the primary domain for your organization. It's very important that you do this correctly because there is no way to change this. We can basically erase the steps that you already took and take you back to zero on the transition so you can begin again. But in advance, just pick the right primary domain. All of your other domains will come over as aliases or additional domains. So there's no concerns here about losing any information that you have there. Next up is admin roles. In the admin roles here, things are a little bit different in how they work on the Google side from how they work on the Postini side. So I strongly recommend that you read the help articles about that topic. The administrative privileges details page that is on the transition guide linking to other administrative settings has a very clear definition of what all of the permissions are that you can assign. So to become familiar with that in advance, when you see the admin roles menu for the first time, you'll see that there are 5 system roles, super admin, groups, and so on. You can create additional new roles that are custom for you. So if you don't like how we've hard-coded in the privileges for super admin, as an example, you can create your own super admin and go through the check marks of all of the options that are in here to assign those privileges to that role. And then it's very easy to assign administrators to that. You click Assign Admins, you type in their email address. If you've got more than one person you want to assign, just put them all in here at once, confirm the assignment, and you'll see them all listed on the screen. It also makes it much easier for you to audit who you've given privileges to, because it's a simple click on the privilege itself to see all the administrators that you've already given that role, and it's very easy to select somebody and unassign them from a role. No more hunting through your organizational hierarchy and clicking in and out of the View Edit Profile mode to figure out who's got what permission and change it one at a time. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is the Google Apps menu. This is where you will see a link to every one of the applications that are part of the core Google Apps for Business bundle. Most of them are going to be turned off for you. The one that we're going to spend the most time in is the Gmail one, because that's the only one that's relevant to you if you are one of our classic customers still using an on-prem email system. Now, what I'm going to show you is how to navigate into this, what the submenus are, and the most important menu being the Advanced Settings menu, which you can bookmark separately so that you can get straight into it when you need to make any changes to any of your email filtering policies. So in Gmail, there are several settings in here that won't be relevant to you if you're not using Gmail as your messaging platform. So user settings, email addresses, labs, irrelevant. The hosts menu is synonymous with delivery manager. So here is where the transition wizard would have copied over all of your settings that it found in every email config that you might have in the system. It will bring them over with the host name in both places. So if you were using a host name, you'll see that here. If you were using an IP address, you'll see that here. Makes it very easy for you to come in after the fact and give this a meaningful name so that you've got a cleaner display. And you'll notice it also supports the same options that Postini Delivery Manager did. So what we're looking at right now is an example of a customer that only has a single host. If you already have Delivery Manager and Postini set up with more than one host because you're load balancing to more than one gateway, then what you'll see in this primary section is more than one value. So it might be a 50-50, maybe you've got 3 servers in Postini that are load balancing. You'll see those listed here. In the secondary spot, if you happen to have the Postini Delivery Manager, the bottom half of that screen set up with a failover server, so if all your primary gateways are unavailable, you want us to deliver email somewhere else rather than kick off spooling, you'll see that listed down here. And again, if you have more than one failover server that's load balanced, you'll see all of that listed down here. So you're not losing any functionality in terms of the inbound gateways that the service is delivering to. Okay. The next thing that's relevant in the settings for Gmail is the default routing. Postini has actually three modes of operation. The first mode of operation we've always referred to as pass-through mode, and that's where if there was any inbound email to an invalid email address that you hadn't registered in Postini, we would just deliver that to your on-prem system so it could figure out what to do with it. The second mode, which was our best practice, was called non-account bouncing. And in this mode, the premise was you had already defined all of the valid SMTP addresses in Postini, and you wanted us to be the checker. So if an email address for Bubbles 99 was coming in, and presuming you don't have a Bubbles 99, we would reject the message for you rather than delivering it to you or doing any further filtering. And the third mode is called catch-all. In the Google environment, the default routing menu will allow you to set up the system in what we call, in the Postini world, pass-through mode. So if you still want us to deliver unknown email to your on-prem system, you'll set up this default routing mode so that that's what happens. If we don't recognize the email address, we're going to give it to your gateway so that your gateway can decide what to do with it. The next feature I'm going to show you is also under the Advanced Settings menu, and this is where I already have it bookmarked up here. So it'll be very easy for you to get into this particular menu if you just bookmark it straight away. What you'll find in the Advanced Settings menu is a link to the Hosts menu. So what we've done is we've tried to pull everything that you would otherwise find in the Orgs and Users menu, inbound services, outbound services, inbound servers, and outbound servers menu. It's all here in this one Advanced Settings menu. So again, Hosts is Delivery Manager. Default routing is how you want us to handle unknown users. And under General Settings, this is where you'll once again see your organizational hierarchy. This is a split screen, so you can kind of size this up depending on which part of the system you want to look at. You can expand and collapse your organizational hierarchy. The inheritance rules still persist on this side. So if you were to set a policy way up here at the top of your organizational hierarchy, it will automatically be inherited to all of the suborgs that you have. There are certain policies in here that once you set them are domain-wide by default. You can't, some of these things you cannot set at a suborg level, and I'll point some of those out to you. And then others of them you can set at a suborg level. Not only can you do that, but you can create locally applied rules lower down in your organizational hierarchy that you cannot accidentally overwrite simply by making a change higher up in the hierarchy. So that's another improvement that was added to the re-engineering of the Postini-like services. So in here, I'm going to go through the options that are down below. There are several sections in here delineated by a light gray menu bar. For those of you that are classic Postini customers with on-prem gateways, some of this is not relevant to you. So I'm going to skip Setup, I'm going to skip End User Settings, and I'm going to skip End User Access and get right to the Spam section. You're going to care about Spam. I'm going to then move down to the Compliance section where you'll find all of the features from inbound settings and outbound settings are listed, and then spend a few minutes talking about the routing menus. Right now I am connected to the very top organization in my hierarchy, and I can see email whitelist, inbound gateway, spam, and block senders. Email whitelist and inbound gateway are domain-wide settings. The minute I click down off of that account org, if you will, and look at this same set of options, you'll notice that those IP fields are no longer available to me, but the spam and block senders are. So you can have a different approved and blocked senders list in each of your suborgs. And again, if you already had that set up in Postini, all of those got copied over, so you're not losing anything. What the IP whitelists allow you to do is set some exclusions at the top level filtering that I showed you on that flow chart. So Google does rate limiting or email rate shaping based on IP reputation, We do virus filtering, we do blatant spam blocking, all of the things that you would expect us to do at the high level. The email whitelist and the inbound gateway are means for you to tell the Google filtering service to give a higher level of trust to email coming from certain IP addresses. My favorite example is Constant Contact as an example. That's a very popular mass email company that typically sends email to you purporting to be you. So this is where you would start setting up that trust. The spam and blocked senders menus are the equivalent to the Postini approved and blocked senders list. As Jack mentioned, you're no longer limited to 4,000 characters on this list. So it can be much, much larger. But the point I want to make here is the Google spam filtering service works completely different from how the Postini spam service works. So in many respects, you may not have to manage these two lists as much as you did on the Postini side. There's also a unique difference in here. So when, let me just cancel out of this. When you're first looking at this screen, Google really loves clean interfaces. We don't want to put buttons and knobs and dials in your face unless it's meaningful to you. So as you're looking at this screen, all you see is spam and block senders, and you're probably wondering, how the heck do I edit this? As soon as you mouse over that, it becomes the focus, and this is where you'll be able to see the options to manage that particular menu, and that holds true for everything in this configuration. So the difference that we built in here, the transition wizard is only going to bring over one list, and it's going to be everything that you had on the Postini side. When you mouse over that list and click edit, you'll see all of the domain names and email addresses that it copied over. You'll see that it's much easier to add. In Postini, you had to do type in one address, click add, type in the next, click add. Here, we're going to let you do a comma or a space delimited email address to add to that list, or very easily cycle through here and delete from that list. But better still is the ability to take this list, should you want to, and organize it into smaller lists. So in my example, I pulled one address out of the big list and put it in a new sublist because the CEO asked for these. These lists will persist throughout other menus within the control panel that approved senders might be relevant for, like the TLS policies or a specific content rule that you don't want the CEO's trusted senders to be subjected to. So I'll point that out to you. Remember these two names, trusted senders and CEO asked for these, because they'll show up again in this demo. Block senders works the same way. So here you can have a single list, or you can break your list up into sublists that have meaningful names. You can also customize the reject notice. In Postini, you got this violates our email policy reject notice, and not a lot of choices there. Okay. So those are the things that you'll find in the spam section. Again, the IP will only show up, the IP lists only show up when you're at the top of the organization. Spam and block senders will appear in every one of your organizations. Moving down to compliance, I'm going to skip some of these menus because they're not relevant to classic customers. Our hybrid and Google Apps customers are already familiar with some of these things, so we'll talk about those in a different session. If you were using Postini for outbound and had a footer configured, that will be copied over, and going into the edit menu, you'll be able to customize the font style and size, foreground, background, and so forth. So rich text formatting is supported on Google. For those of our customers that are international, the various translations that you may have put in place in Postini for your footers are again still supported. Anything that you had configured as an inbound content manager or an outbound content manager rule will appear with this label content compliance. It will have exactly the same rule name that you had in Postini. I'm going to click on edit, and you'll see that it will have been marked as either an inbound or an outbound rule. The good news is, going forward, any new rules that you create, one rule can do both inbound and outbound at the same time. For our classic customers, the internal settings are irrelevant because we don't see your internal email, but you have more flexibility here. The expressions that you had in Postini will be copied over. So whether it was a simple match or a complex match where you have us doing regex pattern matching, looking in a specific part of message, all of that will be copied over. Now, Google supports a different regex syntax, so there will be a need for some testing on any regex policies and tweaking of how that syntax works. Some of that's going to be factored into the transition wizard, but this is an area that you're going to want to test in that week that Jack mentioned before you change your MX records. One other thing I wanted to show you is, in addition to the expressions being copied over, the closest disposition will have been selected. So there's more power here on what you can do with messages that match certain criteria. You can now modify the message in any number of ways. If you had the rule set to bounce, you'll see that it came over with this reject status, and you can have a specific bounce message in each rule. In Postini, again, you only had one bounce message. Here you can get very creative and have a bounce message in each rule. In the modify section, the ability to use any combination of these is presented to you. So there might be a reason why you want to add a specific header to an inbound or outbound message so that the receiving gateway can find it and do any additional handling based on the existence of that header. You can prepend the subject line. You can change the route. So anything that got copied into the hosts menu from Delivery Manager will appear on this change route option. So this is where you can set up intelligent routing based on the content of the message, not just the user and what subord they belong to. So a little bit more finite controls on message delivery. Postini had the ability for you to reroute a message to somebody else's quarantine. Google is going to allow you to reroute that message to somebody else's mailbox account. So that'll make things a little bit more productive for users that need to accept that type of mail flow to determine what to do with it. You can still have bypass spam rules. A new option is to strip attachments from messages. You'll still be able to add more recipients to a message, and require secure transport for onward delivery is the last hop from us to the recipient, whether it's inbound, the hop from us to you, or outbound, the hop from us to the external recipient. And down here in the options menu, this is where you can still set a bypass for approved senders. But this is where it doesn't have to be every single approved sender. This is where that list capability that I mentioned a moment ago will come in handy. So if you want only the CIO's list to be the one that can bypass that rule, you can be much more laser focused on that policy. Attachment policies will pull over. You'll see them listed here with the attachment compliance label and whatever the rule was. So in this case, we've got a 10 meg message size limit being enforced. Google has a hard-coded 25 meg message size limit. I emphasize the word hard-coded. There's no way to create an exclusion to that right now. If you have a need for larger file attachments, register that as a support case so that we can determine how best to handle your requirements. If you are enforcing a smaller than 25 meg message size limit, that will be copied over. And there's also the ability to set policies around file types. So if you're blocking any of these file types, you'll still have these policies in place. You'll notice executables are not on this list. And again, that's because Google has that hard-coded into its DNA as well. You don't have to tell us to block executables. We're just going to do it for you. You have the same modify and reject options here for attachment policies, including just stripping the attachment, sending the rest of the message on to the intended recipient with an explanation as to why that attachment was stripped. Bypassing approved senders, again, is by list. So you can choose a short list if you don't want everybody to bypass that. Secure transport compliance is the same as our policy enforced TLS. Here you will see any list that you had has been brought over. The same list building capability that I've been describing prior will exist here. So if you wanted to just combine all of your approved senders into a single centralized list, you'd be able to do that and use it both as an approved sender, use it in the bypass policies for content and attachment rules, and use it here as the enforced TLS policy. TLS policies in Postini had to be set up in two separate menus, the inbound servers menu and the outbound servers menu. Here you can manage all of those in a single screen, so you know that you've got parity between those two lists if that's important to you. The next thing I'm going to go to is the objectionable content list. This is where you can create your own George Carlin list, if you will. So here you can add in any words and phrases, or words, just words that you do not want to come and go in your email. And it's a simple matter of, just typing in the words you don't want to see, clicking save, saving that list. It breaks them out into individual words, and we'll look for those in any inbound and outbound messages based on how you've configured the routing rules. Skipping a few things that aren't relevant to the entire audience and moving on to the routing policies. So earlier I mentioned the default routing is how email to unknown addresses can be handled. So if you wanted us to deliver unknown email to your gateway, you'll use default routing. If you want us to reject unknown mailboxes, you'll have the option to discard right here. Outbound Gateway is where the hop from Google to the external recipient. This is not you to Google. This is Google to the external recipient. Is there another stopping point, another gateway that you want us to deliver your outbound email to, and its responsibility will be to get that message to the ultimate external recipient. This is really handy for customers that have on-prem DLP solutions, on-prem archiving solutions where you don't want us to just ship the email to the intended recipient. It needs to go somewhere else for additional handling, and that somewhere else will get it delivered. The non-Gmail Mailbox menu is going to be used by all of our classic customers. So this is where the quarantine summary schedule will appear. And this is where you're telling us, for this particular organization, all of the valid email is being delivered to this particular gateway, and anything that is not valid, that is going to be quarantined by Google for 30 days, needs to appear on a daily quarantine summary and sent to the users in this organization at this time of day and these days of the week. Okay? The quarantine summary on the Google side looks remarkably similar to the quarantine summary from Postini. The key differences here are you cannot edit the paragraph of text, and your Your support address is not going to be in the from address, but your users will still see the subject, the sender, the date, and an action of deliver. If they click deliver, the message is sent to your on-prem server, shows up in their inbox just like it does today, with an additional function of sending back a "this is not spam" signal to the Gmail spam engine. That is all your end users need to do post-transition. They do not have to manage an artificially crafted approved and blocked senders list. They do not have to try to figure out of the 5 categories of spam if they want it to be lenient 1 or aggressive 5. The training of the Gmail spam engine is as simple as them saying, deliver, this is not spam. And we will be building into the message center the ability for them to say, oh, and by the way, this thing that you did deliver to me is spam. That's all they're going to have to do post-transition. When the message center is released, the subject link in the quarantine summary that I'm showing you on the screen right now, there will be a link on there that will allow them to go and read the message in the message center before they deliver it. They'll still be able to deliver from the message center with the same "this is not spam" and an option in there to say "this is spam." So we are simplifying the lives of your end users. For those of you that have your end users logging into the message center using the Postini managed password system, those passwords will be part of the transition. Some of them might not be transportable, so you'll be notified if any of your users' passwords need to be reset. For those of you that are using cross-authentication, Google doesn't support that, but Google does support SAML. So you can look at the security assertion markup language, SAML options, to set up a single sign-on. For those of you that are already using Postini's support for SAML v 1.1, you just need to upgrade to SAML v 2.0, and they'll be able to access the separate web UI called the redesigned message center once that is launched. So that's the end user experience. Much simpler environment. A feature that is built into the quarantine summary now, for those of you that have already transitioned, is a link that allows the end user to ask for a refreshed copy of the quarantine summary throughout the day. So they don't have to wait a full 24 hours to see if anything new has been quarantined. Just find the quarantine summary that was delivered that day, click the link that's in there to get a refresh, and that will help them manage what's in that quarantine in the meantime until the message center is released. Okay, so that is all about classic customers. The SMTP relay service is where your outbound routing rules will be set. So the hop from you to us. In this example, I've got an IP address that represents a classic customer's on-prem system that is coming on over. You'll see that there's a required TLS encryption option here. This is synonymous with the Postini outbound TLS menu. There are 2 settings in there. It's probably timed me out, so give me a second to log back into Postini just so everybody knows what I'm talking about. There are 2 settings in the outbound TLS menu of Postini. The first setting is about what you want the TLS session between you and Postini to be set to. And the recommendation has always been to have it set to accept SMTP and TLS. That is the healthiest setting for your server, because if you say accept only TLS and for some reason your server doesn't send us the start TLS command, we'll reject that message. We're going to give you the same advice on the Google side. Do not turn on this required TLS encryption unless you know what the implications are for your server to be responsible for always setting up that TLS session. Otherwise, you'll have a mail flow issue. So be cognizant of that. The hop from Google to the external recipient, again, that is set up in the secure transport menu, which is synonymous with the the values that were at the bottom of the Postini TLS screen. So any domains you had here will have been copied into the Secure Transport Compliance menu. There are some other receiving and routing rules down here that we're going to talk about in a later session. What I'd like to move over to now is 3 more menus on the control panel, and then Jack, I'll give it back to you. Next menu I'm going to show you is the reports menu. Are we doing okay on time, Jack?
We're a little bit over an hour, but let's continue. We've still got a lot of people watching.
Yeah, so I've only got a few things I want to point out. The reports menu is where you're going to find the log search. You'll notice right here that we're giving you the good news that it will never be longer than a 1-hour wait before you can find a message when you're doing log search troubleshooting. We're giving you access to a new reporting feature, which is the admin audit log. So you can see here I was making a whole bunch of changes in the middle of the night. So me as the administrator, you know what I've been up to. And then the Postini statistical reports, as they start to appear, they will show up in this menu as well. So Jack mentioned this calendar quarter, statistical reports will begin to appear, and this is where you'll find them. The next menu is the security menu. This is there's 2 things in here that I think you'll find very helpful. One is the password monitoring menu if you're using Google's password management system. So you can find users that have weak passwords and do a forced password reset on them to get them to put in something stronger. And under the advanced settings menu, a very simple setup wizard for configuring single sign-on using SAML. So there's a lot of information on this particular page if you wanted to have your identity management system handle authenticating your users into the message center. And then the last menu I'm going to show you is the support menu. So in the support menu, you'll find a lot of links to online support materials. You'll find the toll-free number to contact support, as well as your customer PIN. Many of you are probably already familiar with the expiring PIN, so you just click Get PIN right here, and you're good to go. So online support, access to the Google Enterprise Support support portal, as well as the legacy support portal. So those are the things that I wanted to show you. So Jack, I'm going to pass it back to you, and just remind everybody to find the Postini Transition Resource Center and follow along with the things that we're still launching, and then the transition guide that replaces the Postini admin guide.